Hey, Truth Seeker, welcome back. Zach here. Today is Thursday, February 5th, 2015, and we are being given headlines that Jordan is bombing Syria and supposedly ISIS. In this post, I want to talk about ISIS, what it supposedly is, and why I think we're being given these ongoing hoaxes to justify what is occurring. Before we get into that, I want to watch this video, a piece of history. This is General Wesley Clark, who nearly ran for the Democratic presidential seat in 2004 instead of John Kerry. Let's listen to what he says about Syria, where Jordan is now bombing today.
About 10 days after 9/11, I went through the Pentagon and I saw Secretary Rumsfeld and Deputy Secretary Wolfowitz. I went downstairs just to say hello to some of the people on the Joint Staff who used to work for me. And one of the generals called me and he said, "Sir, you got to come in. You got to come in and talk to me a second." I said, "Well, you're too busy." He said, "No, no." He says, "We've made the decision. We're going to war with Iraq." This was on or about the 20th of September. I said, "We're going to war with Iraq. Why?" He said, "I don't know." He said, "I guess they don't know what else to do." So I said, "Well, did they find some information connecting Saddam to Al-Qaeda?" He said, No. He says, "There's nothing new that way. They just made the decision to go to war with Iraq." He said, "I guess it's like we don't know what to do about terrorists, but we got a good military and we can take down governments." And he said, "I guess if the only tool you have is a hammer, every problem has to look like a nail." So I came back to see him a few weeks later, and by that time we were bombing in Afghanistan. I said, "Are we still going to war with Iraq?" And he said, "Oh, it's worse than that." He said, he reached over on his desk, he picked up a piece of paper, he said, I just got this down from upstairs," meaning the Secretary of Defense's office today, and he said, "This is a memo that describes how we're going to take out 7 countries in 5 years, starting with Iraq and then Syria, Lebanon, Libya, Somalia, Sudan, and finishing off Iran." The truth is about...
All right, Truth Seeker. So he said that was 10 days after September 11th. This September, that will be 14 years ago. And in the countries he's named, Syria is the one that's now coming up. He said it was going to be 7 years. Well, instead, it looks like it's closer to 14. But the point is these plans were made and were already existing in the wake of 9/11. This is part of an ongoing plot that's being rolled out. So here we are. It's 2015 now, and we're being given headlines like this: "Be merciful. Pilot's family begs." And it looks like there's a man here in the water with his underwear. Looks like a total photo op. I mean, can you imagine this? Can you imagine this scene? And the cameraman being there to capture it just like that? How perfect. So this hyphenated caption, "Be merciful," has a Pythagorean gematria of 49, a number that's getting quoted a lot at this time in history right now. We're in the 49th Jubilee year. This pilot's name, Moez al-Kasaspa, has a Pythagorean gematria of 44, like the simple English gematria of the word kill. We talk much on this video blog about the number 44 and what it has to do with death, assassination. So we were given those headlines. This was December 24th, the day before Christmas. On Christmas Eve, we got these headlines. Just days ago, we found out that this pilot was burned alive, again hyphenated. With simple English gematria, the phrase "burned alive" sums to 113, a number that's coded oh so often into these hoaxes. And so much more. Even Disney and Pixar admit that they code these numbers into their movies. And why? I imagine for the same possible subliminal reasons. Possibly these numbers somehow program us subconsciously because we're constantly being bombarded with them. And they seem to have to do with something about accepting fake. from Disney animated films to this news, and possibly something much greater than that. So we have these coded headlines, coded names. Now, in response, and doesn't this just seem oh so immature, Truth Seeker? In response, we're being told that Jordan is bombing ISIS in Syria because of this pilot getting burned alive. Of course, it's awful that somebody was burned alive, but how does it bring justice in the world to bomb a country? You're just going to bring more death and destruction. You know, one bad act shouldn't beget more bad acts. When are we going to get over this philosophy? How come as a society we continue to go along with this philosophy? This is the post 9/11 era mentality. Is it not? You know, an eye for an eye, a tooth for a tooth. We don't teach this to our kids. We don't teach this in schools. We don't say this is right, but as a nation, we accept it and we applaud it and we cheer for it. If you go on YouTube and you look at the comments for the videos having to do with this bombing, you see how many people are cheering it on. Nobody should be cheering on bombing. Imagine if your town was bombed by fighter jets overhead. Would you ever want to live through that experience? No. And look at these headlines from CNN. Just the beginning. Coded headlines, taunting headlines that they've been switching up throughout the day. Here's another one. Upping the ante with the same picture. More coded gematria. I want to point out that with simple English gematria, upping the ante sums to 156. This is just like God with English gematria. In English gematria, you take the simple English gematria. Remember, God is 26, and you just multiply it by 6. In the film Truman Show, the name Truman Burbank sums to 156, and that film was released on the 156th day of the year. And that movie's about playing God. And I think these people who run this show, give us this fake news, orchestrate these wars, I think they truly see themselves as gods. And I think this is their arrogance coming through in these headlines. If you've read the book 1984, it's about ongoing wars that nobody understands for what reasons in terms of the civilian population. It's pretty much like the nation we live in now. During the Gulf War, Jordan's relations were damaged with the United States, but now they're an ally. I just want to point out that, just looking at more wars from these regions, memorable wars, the dates of the Gulf War are very curious. Operation Desert Storm lasted exactly 42 days. Remember, the word war is 23 plus 1 plus 18, simple English gematria 42, just like the word gun. Operation Desert Storm, this tiny war, lasted 42 days, from January 17th to February 28th. Similar time of year as well. It started on August 2nd, 8-2. The word soldier equals 82. Curiosities. More headlines about Jordan striking ISIS. King to Pilot's dad, we're avenging his killing. I mean, just nonsensical, Truth Seeker. Government's got all the money in the world to spend on wars. How about for some healing causes? How about for some better schools? Truth Seeker, we could live in a world where classroom sizes had ratios of 12 students to a teacher. We could have that if we decided to pay for that as a society instead of all this war. All hooked on the war. And how do they keep us invested in war in the year 2015? With more and more bogusness. ISIS is known as the Islamic State of Iraq and the Levant. Look, it's in Syria and Iraq. Recall Iraq is the nation we went into, and we were once told we would be there for a very short period of time, quick war, we'd be greeted as liberators, and the country would forever be better off. Well, instead, we were there for a very long time. We brought the country into a state of chaos. Our CIA now tells us it's the least safe country in the whole world. And now it's the breeding ground for ISIS. A reason for a new war. Or continued war, I should say. How can it be new when it's continued, right? Old war. Ongoing war. For the entire time the United States has existed, all but 20-some years, it has been at war with some part of the world, some nation. An incredible percentage. If you're not familiar with the region, here's Jordan that's now bombing its neighbor Syria. And we're saying that this is where we want to take the war to. ISIS. Back to Iraq and Syria. You know, there's also stuff going on down in Yemen, down south. What a mess, Truth Seeker. Let's watch this CNN news coverage of the Jordan bombing. Let's notice this is Barbara Starr right here. CNN, they like to quote all their news anchor names. The name Barbara Starr has the 47 gematria. Earlier this year, we shot 47 cruise missiles at ISIS. CNN had that coverage for us. All right, here we go.
Official tells me the first round of Jordanian airstrikes against ISIS in Syria is now underway. This obviously very sensitive business in terms of exactly where the planes are flying, the targets they're striking. We can also tell you U.S. warplanes, as you would expect, are flying alongside in support of the Jordanians, the U.S. providing intelligence, surveillance, reconnaissance, targeting assistance, also on standby.
Oh, right as I paused it, it went away. But did you notice how the temperatures were 47 degrees, Truth Seeker? Just from now on, pay attention to the weather and the temperature in your area. I've noticed since I've become aware of these numbers that so often where I live, the temperature is reported at 47 degrees this time of year, and also when it gets warmer at 74. And it just makes me go, is this even the real temperature? Or are they just putting these numbers in front of us all the time? You know, I never realized these types of things for my whole life, but now that it's in my consciousness and I know to look for it, I can't miss it. And I mean, you know, here it is. They're even saying the temperature's 47 in Atlanta and Charlotte. Here we go.
Combat search and rescue assets, aircraft and other airplanes from the United States in case a pilot were to go down, if they were to be shot down or have mechanical trouble and their plane goes down. So everything in place and now underway. The Jordanians are flying F-16s. That is their main airframe in their Air Force. This is what had been widely expected for the last several days as the Jordanians made a number of public statements that they would be taking action. All of this had been worked over the last several days within the coalition to get the targets. Now, one of the big questions is, what about ISIS? ISIS on the ground. They are far from blind to all of this. They know that Jordan, they know that the coalition is coming after them. So the question will be, when these warplanes go overhead, what ISIS targets will they find? Will ISIS have tried to run away and hide? Will ISIS stand and fight? This may now be the big unknown in the coming hours. Where is ISIS, and can the Jordanians get to them?
All right, Truth Seeker. So that about wraps it up. This ISIS revenge plot is based on a hoax. You know, the Jordanian pilot is likely nothing more than a myth. A photo opportunity, a false story, and hours of media broadcasting doesn't make something real. And that's the lesson a lot of people aren't learning in the post 9/11 era. You know, George W. Bush once went on TV and said there were WMDs in Iraq, and if we didn't go to war, there could be major consequences in the forms of mushroom clouds. That's how he put it. Well, as it turned out, there was nothing. Yet somehow we remained at war there for more than a decade. And now look. Now look at what it is. ISIS. More excuses. More lies. More propaganda. And worse yet, more gullible people falling for this nonsense. We got to wake up. There's an end to this. And the end's going to be an even worse place than we already are. All right. Until next time, Truth Seeker.